Okay, I think we're all set now.
Yeah.
So what is financial exploitation? Essentially, it is the improper or illegal use of an elder's financial resources through but not limited to deceit, coercion, or just undue influence of the elder. Some examples of this can be someone cashing your checks for you that they might have written, forging your signature on documents that you might not have seen, someone misusing or stealing your money, misuse of power of attorney, or just wealth draining of elders by debt collectors. We're going to talk more about debt collection scams and fraudulent checks in just a minute. So how can you go about preventing financial exploitation? Avoid Help your elders to avoid isolation, stay active, socialize with your friends and families. Just try and be out there with as many people as possible. I know in COVID times it's been hard, but there are a lot of community resources and activities out there for anyone to join. It's important to monitor your financial transactions closely and be aware of anyone who pressures you into making immediate financial decisions. Keep important legal and financial documents in a safe place. Personal information is something that's very important and valuable to you that you don't want to give other people easy access to. Make sure you're screening your calls and know who you're talking to when you do answer the phone or text people. And lastly, just the golden rule, if it sounds too good to be true, it most likely is a scam. So what exactly is the process of scamming? Essentially, they'll start off with some main form of scam. This can be email, phone, mail solicitation, anything where they can gain access to your personal information. Your personal information can be your banking account numbers, your address, your mom's maiden name, basically just information that they can use to then assume your identity or steal your identity, essentially. With this, they can then access your money. They have multiple ways of doing this that we'll talk about later, whether it's fake checks or just other acts of scamming or misleading the public. Just some good rules to know. Like I said before, the golden rule is if it sounds too good to be true, chances are it is a scam. Some quick tips to remember is always read the small print and be sure to get things in writing if possible. Make sure that asterisks or small print are not used as a way of altering the meaning of the advertised statements. These are commonly used to indicate restrictions. Number 2 is always guard your personal information. Like I said before, this is how they can easily access your money. If someone contacts you and says you've been a victim of fraud, verify the person's identity before you provide any personal information. It's important to remember legitimate credit card issuers and other companies may contact you if there's an unusual pattern indicating that someone else might be taking money from your accounts or opening up accounts on your behalf. But usually, they'll ask you about particular transactions made and they won't request your account numbers or other personal information. If they're calling you, they should already have this information. Also, law enforcement agencies might try to contact you if you've been a victim of fraud, but just to be safe, always ask for the person's name, number of the agency or company, and the address. Just make sure that you can do your due diligence and research them before you provide any more information, which is rule number 3. So you can go to government agencies to see if a business is registered. We'll give you the website for that a little later in the presentation. Basically, if that business is allowed, basically these websites will tell you if that business is allowed to do business in your state. You can also call the Attorney General's office to see if there's a history of complaints, and you can see if a nonprofit is registered if you're looking to make a charitable donation. Some potential consequences if you're not doing your due diligence can include loss of money, time, and just many other consequences that can ruin your reputation or have legal action even taken against you. So what are some types of scams or some examples? A good example is the grandparent or emergency scam. This happens a lot through the phone, over the phone, where you'll get phone calls from someone impersonating a law enforcement agent saying, for example, your grandchild has been arrested and they need this much money for bail or something like that. They'll make it you feel like there's a strong sense of urgency and that you need to send this money immediately. These are really important to fact check and just make sure you know who they're talking to you about. Or like think of the person like your grandchild. If they're telling you they've been arrested, think of that your grandchild's character. Is this something normal for them? Contact your family members. Just do your research before. Lottery scams, if someone calls you up and tells you you won the lottery, but you have no memory of entering the lottery, it is most likely a scam. Medicaid, government, IRS, banks, people calling you to impersonate any of these agencies. Often this is with the goal of getting your personal information, bank account numbers, so then they can go in and open accounts under your name or just find ways to steal your money. Fake debt collectors, well, they'll get you to pay debts that you might not actually owe or pay debts to the wrong agencies, and just robocalls. I'm sure we've all been getting a lot of those about your car's extended warranty, whatnot. We'll talk more about how you can avoid those a little further on. Spoofing. So what is spoofing? This happens when a scammer will change their phone number as it appears on the receiver's ID. So it won't come up as no caller ID. They can essentially change their numbers to make it look like a bank or financial institution is calling you. They can even make it look like it's a school or family members. This can occur on any type of phone, and it is used, like I said, used by scammers to impersonate anyone. There's a common variation of this called neighbor spoofing, essentially where they can take your phone number and mimic theirs to look like the first 6 digits of your phone number. So it looks like they're calling from a local area to impersonate someone that you might know and increase the likelihood of you picking up the phone. Spoofing can also work with text messages and can be used to send miscellaneous hyperlinks, hoping you'll click, and then it'll often lead you to malware software. And a little more on what phishing and smishing is. So phishing is a common type of online scam that targets consumers by sending them an email that will appear from a well-known source like an internet provider, a bank, mortgage company, or even just someone that you know. For example, it can ask the consumer to provide personal information or contain malware software so they can access or hack into your computer and take the information they're looking for. Similarly to this is smishing. There really are essentially the same type of scam. However, smishing happens over text messaging. So like I said, with the number neighbor scam of spoofing, it can look like there's someone from within your area trying to contact you. But just if you don't recognize the phone number, be very hesitant before clicking on any links or photos or downloads that they send you. If you don't recognize the number, just proceed with caution. Telemarketing and unwanted phone calls. What exactly should you do? Number 1 rule, hang up the phone. If you don't know who's calling you, if you answer the phone and you don't hear a hello or recognize the voice that you're talking to, just hang up. It's the easiest way to go about avoiding being scammed. Second thing to remember is do not send cash, checks, gift cards, or wire money unless you initiated the phone call. Same can be said for giving out personal information. You might not know who's calling you. Even if you think you recognize the photo ID, it could be someone pretending to be your bank, pretending to be the police department. If you weren't the one that initiated the call, just do your research and double check. That's why it's important to make note of a caller's number, time, and date of the call. If they're calling about collecting a debt, just demand verification in writing of the debt that you owe. If they're not able to comply with this, it might be a little fishy or sketchy. Be sure to report any scams to the Federal Trade Commission. That's how we can keep tabs and make sure that they don't keep doing what they're doing to other people. Because the main point of scams is they'll try it with as many people as possible before it eventually works. The information to report, you can do it online at ftc.gov/complaint or by phone at 877-FTC-help. So fake check scams. These are things that aren't necessarily easily caught by you because checks can look incredibly real. The main scam will start by offering to buy something you advertised. Maybe it's home improvement, or you are selling a necklace or a book online, and they say they will pay you X amount of money, and then you have to pay them back that money because of foreign banking is a very common reasoning for why you need to resend checks. Or they'll buy a service or item from you with a faulty check. They might pay you to do some work at a home or give you an advance on a foreign or domestic sweepstakes you supposedly won. They often claim, like I said, to be from another country, and the scammers might say it's too difficult or complicated to send you the money directly from that country, and then they'll arrange to have someone else within your country or within the US to send you a check and then have you wire the money back to them after you deposit the check if you're selling something. It's a little confusing, but if someone is trying to purchase something from you and they're making you jump through a lot of hoops to essentially get the money or have you pay them back, that's fishy. If they're paying you and you have to pay them back, that should be a first hint that it is most likely a scam. So essentially what to beware of when looking at fake checks is you don't have to wait long to use the money, but that doesn't necessarily mean the check is good. Because under federal laws, banks have to make the funds that you deposit available quickly. So it's normally within a few days, like 1 to 5 days, depending on the type of check and the bank that you use. But essentially, just because you can withdraw this money doesn't mean it's good, even if it's a cashier's check. It can take weeks for a bank to discover a forgery and then for the check to bounce. Number two, that's why it's so important to be cautious of depositing checks, is you are responsible for the checks you deposit. That's because you're in the best position to determine the risk. These checks can look incredibly real, so it comes down to you are the person who dealt directly with the person who issued the check. So when that check bounces, the bank deducts the amount that was originally credited to your account. There isn't enough to cover that. The bank may be able to take money from your other accounts that you have within that financial institution, or even sue you to recover the funds. There have been some cases where even law enforcement authorities can bring charges against you if they suspect that you were involved in the scam and knew the check was fake. Which is why it's important to always write down the information of who called you. So even if this happened, you have a backup log of this person called me then, this is how we can track the scam essentially. And lastly, like I was hinting at in the first slide, there is no legitimate reason for someone who is giving you money to ask for you to wire that money back. If a stranger wants to pay you for something, insist on a cashier's check for the exact amount, preferably from a local bank or a bank with a branch in your area. And that is all from me today. I'm going to pass it back over to Nico, who's going to talk more about mail scams, email scams, what to look out for when you're looking to make charitable contributions, and just recognizing and preventing ID theft. Thank you so much. Let Nico take it away now.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Grace. So as Grace was saying, we're going to talk about mail fraud. And before we get into emails, before we get too technological here, let's just bring it back to good old-fashioned US postal mail. And the thing is that if you believe you've been a victim of a fraud of any kind throughout the US mail, then you can report it to the USPS directly. The USPS has its own branch of investigators that will look into people that are using the USPS for nefarious purposes, such as defrauding people. So if you believe you've been a victim of a scam, a fraud, if you think someone is misusing the USPS for any reason, you can directly report it to the USPS. Another problem that personally I've found lately is that I've been getting a lot of spam mail. That's a lot of pre-screened credit cards, pre-screened insurance offers, a lot of unnecessary ads and flyers getting delivered to my house. And it's been getting quite annoying. I'm going to be honest. It's quite a problem. I don't think it's that big of a deal for me to just tear these things up and throw them out, but I do think it's wasteful and it does become tedious. So if you found yourself in a similar position, there's a couple things you can do. The first one is contacting the Direct Marketing Association to remove your name from these lists and address, your name and addresses from mailing lists, so you don't get these flyers, these ads, these coupon codes, stuff like that. And if you're tired of being, considered for pre-screened credit cards and insurance offers and stuff like that, you can always go to www.optoutprescreen.com to opt out from receiving pre-approved credit card applications and insurance offers. That for me has been terribly useful. And I have to say, the first time that I went on the website, I was a little bit hesitant because they do ask you for a lot of personal information. So after doing some more research, you can find that this is the website that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, recommends specifically for this purpose. So I feel like if the federal government is recommending it, it can't get much safer than that when it comes to trusting with your personal information. So feel free to use that for those purposes. Aside from that, if we move on to the next slide, we'll start talking a little bit more about unsolicited email. So just as we have a busy mailbox, we have a busy inbox on our emails. And there's a couple of ways in which you can either prevent from getting a lot of junk email, but also to stop it from coming if it is already coming your way. So the first one is, just as a general rule of thumb, be very hesitant about who and what websites you give your email address to, mainly because it's kind of like you don't just give out your real address to anyone on the street, right? So you're not just going to give your email address, which is a very easy way to contact you, to just any website on the internet. So be very hesitant about like sending in your email address for this or that thing. Maybe you're trusting like bigger businesses, like I don't know, some retail shop that you really like and you're getting coupons from them. But if just some random website that you find is asking you for your email address, better think twice about giving it to them, because you don't know what they're going to do with it. And if you're not going to know if they're going to keep it to themselves either, they might just sell that information later on. So be careful about that. Do not respond to emails where you cannot verify the sender. So if this is an unexpected email from an email address that you cannot verify, you don't know who it is, or you cannot see who it is, you do not identify who's contacting you, then it is best to not respond. So as Grace was saying, if you get a phone call and you don't know who the caller is, you're not expecting the phone call, and the person on the other side isn't saying anything, then the best thing is to just hang up. With these things, it's better to just delete the email and forget about it, or report it. A lot of services such as Outlook and Gmail do allow you to report spam mail or suspicious things that you might receive on your inbox. When it comes specifically to marketing mails, you will find that businesses are required to offer you an option to unsubscribe from their mailing lists. Now, I'm gonna be very blunt here. It's often not easy to find these unsubscribe buttons because they really like to hide it very deep in there. They don't want you to stumble onto this button. But if you scroll all the way down in any marketing email and you look into the really, really fine print, you'll see an option to unsubscribe. That'll take you to a website that'll let you change your mailing preferences so that you don't receive, 10 emails a day from X or Y business trying to sell you coupons or stuff like that. So if that's a problem that you have, that's the solution right there. And if you believe you've been a victim of a crime online, you can file a complaint with the FBI, because often internet crimes are not limited to the Massachusetts jurisdiction. So we would like to direct you over to our federal partners over at the FBI with their internet crime complaint center. So that's the ic3.gov. And that's the FBI website for any crime related, for any internet related crimes. So that's some info on that. So we move on to the next slide. We'll see a couple of examples. So crimes on the internet, of course, are not limited to what happens on your email. And I want to talk about some examples because I think these are the ones that we see the most often, that we hear people complain the most about, both through our lines or hotlines that people call to let us know about complaints or things that they need help with, but also just from my personal experience of going to different places across Massachusetts and talking to people and hearing about their experiences. So the first one that I want to talk about is social networking. So social networking, as terribly useful as it is, especially at a time like this, the pandemic might be ending, but it's still, I think we've realized the importance of being able to connect online. And social networking for me, as someone that lives very far away from home, is a great way to keep up with people, connect with friends and family back home. But I think that a lot of people have found that it's a great way to find new friends. Now, I've personally always been very hesitant about this. Maybe it's, I don't know, my parents taught me at one point that you don't trust strangers on the street, so you shouldn't trust strangers on the internet. And I think that's a great rule of thumb. That doesn't mean that you can't find good people online, but it's never bad to be a little careful about who you're talking to, especially when these people are asking you maybe for some personal information, or they want to know maybe a little too much, or maybe they're asking you for favors. So I want to advise you, just as a rule of thumb, be extra careful about these things. I'm not saying that people that you meet in person are more trustworthy by any means, because people in person can also try to defraud you, and we'll talk about that later on. But I am saying, if you haven't met someone in person, if you don't know how to reach them aside from through social media, then that might be a problem. If they are asking you for favors, if they're asking you for money, if they're asking you too much information, they might be targeting you in order to drain you of your money, drain you of your information, and then steal your identity. So be very careful. Another one is, well, Grace already talked a little bit about fake checks, but just in general, if you're looking to sell or buy or rent things and you're using classified ads online, either through Craigslist or through Facebook Marketplace, just be extra careful. It is very easy to end up being defrauded. I remember back a couple months ago when I was buying my first car, I had absolutely no clue how to go about it. And the first place that I went to was Craigslist. I found this 2014 Prius for for how much was it? It was like $3,500. So if you know anything about buying a car, you know that is an absolutely insane deal, and there was no way that was real. Me not really knowing much, I contacted the person, and then immediately I got an email back that set up a bunch of red flags in my head. So as Grace was saying, the first red flag, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. This was indeed too good to be true, and it ended up being too good to be true, so it wasn't. The other one was, this person wanted for me to send the money back in a way that I wouldn't have been able to file a claim should I have been defrauded. So if the money was sent, I wouldn't have been able to get it back. And they were also alongside asking for the money, they were also asking for information that in any other case I wouldn't have had to give. So with all these things that are setting off red flags in my mind, I'm saying, okay, this is too good to be true. They're asking for too much information. If I am defrauded, I cannot get the money back through this payment method. So I'm just gonna, say, you know what, I better not risk it. If this is real, then someone else is gonna get a great deal, but not me. There's too much to lose here, not enough to win. So again, with classified ads online, it is very hard to verify things. And also alongside that, if you are looking to buy something or sell something or rent something, be very careful if you are meeting someone for the first time in person. My recommendations for that always is, if you're trying to buy or sell something, like try to meet in a public place, try to meet in a crowded place, somewhere that if you do need help, you can reach help. Try to, let people know that you're going to be somewhere, that you're meeting someone that you don't know. Just as added layers of safety. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just saying it's better to be safe than sorry. And then the last one that we want to talk about is employment. So these are just different examples of what we've heard, but essentially what happens is you get offered a job, often remotely, and you end up doing a lot of work to never be paid in the end. So just be very careful when you do sign up for a job, and you are, contacting someone that is legitimate, that you do know works at the establishment that you're contracting for, that you're working for, and that you're getting paid in a legitimate way. And going back to what Grace said, if they're accidentally paying you too much, that is not a legitimate thing. If someone's paying you, you should not have to send them any amount of money back. They're paying you. That's your money to keep. So if they're saying, oh, I meant to pay you $400, but I accidentally sent you the check for $600, you can just cash the check, send me the $200 back. That is absolutely a red flag, and it should alert you that something wrong is happening. And if we move on to the next slide, we're going to see just some general tips on staying safe online. So as I was saying, know who you're dealing with, and when you're releasing personal information, I think a lot of these, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, a lot of these apply both for just in person and online. I think that often because we're online, we don't realize that, like, just because I'm in my home, that doesn't mean that I'm not in danger, or I'm not vulnerable, right? So just treat being online like being outside on a public square. So if someone comes up to you online and asks you for your address, you're not just going to give it to them, right? So why would you do that online? If someone comes up to you and asks you, hey, can I have your phone number? I'm not going to do that to just some random person that walks up to me. Then why would I do it to some pop-up box that comes up on my laptop? Easy as that. Install an antivirus software on your computer. Sometimes even if you are being as witty as possible and you are staying on your toes, things might be happening on the background. I'm not a tech whiz by any means. And so I like to, let people that know better than me take care of me as well. So looking for an antivirus that works is a great tool to have on your tool belt, and it'll protect you from things that you can't see happening in front of you. Be careful not to release too much information on social media. Thieves may use this information, and that is in a little like abstract sense, like things that can be used to steal your identity. So like, for example, don't post a picture of your credit card saying like, oh, I got my new credit card, I am so happy, and then of course posting the number, and people just have access to your credit card now. As of course you wouldn't do that, you would also not say, and this is my recommendation, let's say you're going on a beautiful trip to Tucson, Arizona with all your family and your friends. You're taking everyone with you. And you're posting on social media, oh, very excited about my trip to Tucson this week. Gonna be away for a whole week. All my family's coming with me. As fun and as exciting as that may be as a post, it is also telling anyone that sees the post, there's gonna be no one at my house for the next 2 weeks. Do whatever you want. So just be more careful about the things that you post online. It is both in an abstract, your personal information way, but also in a very real, it can affect you, and like someone can just break into your house while you're not there way. Or telling people where you're at all times. Those can also be dangerous. So just keep an eye out for that. Create strong passwords and change them on a regular basis. I think something that I've found is very useful is just Apple, for example, and Google and other services nowadays create random passwords for you so that your passwords are not associated with your name or your date of birth or your dog's name or the town that you live in. So you just get a random collections of letters and numbers, and then you have a very secure password that people can't just guess. If you don't want to go along with that, then you can create your own passwords. Again, I do recommend just mixing it up, doing something very different, doing something very almost random, and then trying to keep track of those. Like for example, our office makes us change our passwords quite regularly. And I think that's a good practice, just so that if someone were to get your password, then that won't be good for too long. So just a good rule of thumb. And then shred all personal documentation. I don't think that's necessarily an online tip. I think that's just a good life tip. Things like your insurance cards or your bills for your healthcare, or your utilities bills. And we'll talk about utilities bills, but it is very important that those types of documents hold a lot of personal information about you. So be very careful about how you dispose of them and how you throw them out. So that if anyone were to get their hands on those documents, they can't really, unless they spend a lot of time piecing them back together, you're a little bit safer with those numbers and that information. So if we go on to the next slide, just a quick series of numbers. So we will be making this information available to you afterwards, but just if you want to know, the places to report scams, if you've been a victim of a scam over the phone, you can report that to the Federal Trade Commission, that's the FTC, and that's 877-382-4357. As I said, if you've been a victim of a mail scam, you can report that to the USPS directly to their inspection service. And that is 877-876-2455. And then if you've been a victim of an internet scam, you can report that directly to our partners over at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and that's ic3.gov, the Internet Crime Complaint Center. That's ic3.gov. So with that out of the way, we are going to move over to very real, very in-person scams. So I did say it, it doesn't just happen online. It doesn't just happen over the phone or over the mail. And it can be very real. It can happen right in front of you in person. So that we're going to talk about two different types of things. The first one is home improvement and, like contracting work, stuff like that. And then charities. So especially right now with what's happening in Ukraine and also just coming off the holiday season, we see a lot of charities. We're going to talk about that and how to make sure if you are with the best intentions donating money, you're donating it to the right place. You're not just giving money away to people with bad intentions. So if we move over to the next slide, we're going to talk about home improvement scams. So the way that these things work is many scammers will go door to door selling you repair services. They might show up at your door. One that we hear a lot is they will claim that they have leftover materials, say like, oh, hey, Mr. Dueñas, we have a bunch of materials left over. We were paving a driveway down the street and we wanted to see if you were interested because we have all our guys here. We have a bunch of leftover material and we were done earlier with the other work. We can do it for a third of the price because we just are ready to get it done today. But the problem is you have to do it today because the materials are left over today. They are right down the street and the people are contracted till the end of the day. So we have to make this decision right now. So a couple of red flags that Grace already pointed out and that I always keep in mind is if someone's trying to rush you into a decision, if someone's trying to make you, go into something without letting you do your research, without letting you contact someone, without letting you bounce ideas off of other people, then that is a huge red flag. You should always have an opportunity to look into things before you come to a conclusion, especially when money and your home are involved. So your home is just a very important resource that you have. It is kind of like your safe space. You should be able to, be at peace there. And if you have random people walking in and out, that is not necessarily the safest place. So you should always be very careful about who you let into your home, but that's another topic. So the problem with these types of services is they're typically unlicensed and unregistered. Most legitimate businesses will first make you go through a process of getting a quote and understanding what you're signing up for, going through the services. And you should also be very careful when you go through these services, especially when it's something of a larger magnitude. Be sure to check the references for the contractors that you're working with. Be sure to see at other work that they've done so that you don't get left with bad work or no work at all. What we see here is people either do a terrible work and you're already charged for it, or they do a mediocre work and then you get charged way more than you expected. Because you didn't get a chance to get a quote, you didn't get a chance to negotiate, you didn't know what you were signing up for because they rushed you into the decision. You don't really have an opportunity to prepare for what to expect. So again, these people tend to use high pressure tactics in order to rush you into a decision so that you can't think about it too much, so that you can't look into how much it should cost, what it should look like, what you should expect, et cetera, et cetera. So if we move on to the next slide, our tips for this is first, do not let anyone into your home unless you're absolutely sure of who they are what work they've done, and that they're trustworthy. You can check with your city or town if the people that you're letting into your home to do contracted work are licensed and permitted to do this type of work in your city or town. And if they are soliciting, if they're going door to door, they should also have a permit in order to do that. So you can ask them to show you that if they're doing that. If someone comes to your door and is pressuring you to make this decision, you need to take a step back. You need to think about it, and you need to be able to say, you know what, you can get me a quote. We'll look at it. There's no rush to get this done today. Because again, if someone's trying to make you make a decision quickly, then that is not a good sign. So again, remember, your home is your most precious asset. You have to be very careful. As we've said, we've talked about keeping your documents safe. We've talked about keeping your information safe. A lot of that is stored in your house. So be very careful of who you let in. Maybe people are getting in, they're looking at your bills, they're looking at papers that you have lying around that might have important information. So be very careful of who you let into your house. So that's the one type of home improvement of in-person scam. Now we're going to talk about charity scams. And the way that it usually works is, again, people might come knocking to your door, you might run into them on the street. But these organizations that are not entirely, trustworthy, might pose as charities to scam people out of their money. So again, they're going to use high pressure demands. We need to meet this donation quota today. We need to get these people money today. We need to help these families in X or Y place today. We are trying to reach this goal. If you don't do it right now, we're not going to get it done in time, et cetera, et cetera. Often what they'll do is use the name of an organization that sounds very similar to something that we all know, like, for example, YMCA of the USA, but instead of YMCA of the USA, it's YCA of the USA, and you're just like, oh, they probably just it's a misprint, or the person that was talking to me just misspoke, and that's why that happened. Be very careful of what and who you're donating to, and it's honestly very easy to check. The Attorney General is actually responsible for overseeing charities and nonprofit organizations in the state of Massachusetts. So if we go on to the next slide, I believe we're going to talk about this, or am I wrong? No, I'm not. So make sure that the charity that you are donating to is registered with the Attorney General's Public Charities Division. So we have our annual filings website in which you can check every single approved charity and nonprofit organization in the state of Massachusetts. So you can go there, you can look at their finances. We're also not only checking that they're an actual nonprofit, but we're also checking that this money is going towards the causes that they're advertising, so that it's not just 85% of the money that this organization uses, it's just to pay for administrative fees and their executives salaries or stuff like that. They're actually going towards the causes that they're advertising. Do not rush into giving away your money. Find out exactly what your money is being used for, and that you're donating through a safe way. So that means don't just give out your credit card information or your bank account information over the phone or to someone that you're meeting on the street. Be very careful about how you donate. If you've ever donated to a nonprofit or a political campaign or something like that, you know that there's very safe ways of making these donations both online and in person. And if you want more help on that, you can always give us a call and we'll help you check. So I believe that is it for that topic. And we're going to talk about real quick of identity theft. So how to protect yourself from identity theft. You should always keep a very close eye on your transactions. And on top of that, keep a very close eye on your credit report. So a credit report is going to list out most of your transactions, your credit lines, any type of financial connection that you have to a bank or a mortgage servicer or anything like that. So checking your credit report will allow you to see if there are any accounts, any debts, anything like that. That is not something that you've incurred. So if you go to your credit report and there's something that, I don't know, a loan that you didn't take out or a series of utility bills that you're not, using, then you know that someone has taken your identity and used it for other purposes. Aside from checking your credit report, you should also safeguard all your personal information. So as I've talked about ad nauseum, you have to keep your documents very safe. Keep your bank account statements, keep your utility bills, all that stuff very, very carefully. You should keep those close to you in a place that is safe. And if you don't need them, shred them. Don't just throw them out. And as it says right there, shred any documents that contain your personal information. I think that's a fantastic, fantastic way of keeping yourself safe. So let's say you've taken all the precautions, you've been very careful, but still your identity has been stolen. You've realized that your identity has been stolen. What are the steps in order for you to start remedying the situation? So the first step is going to be submitting an ID theft report. So the ID theft report is made up of two things. First one, ID theft complaint, and that is going to be submitted through the FTC on their website. So the ID theft complaint, submit through the FTC website, ftc.gov. And after you submit that FTC complaint, you can go to your local police and file a report with them. So after you show them the ID theft complaint, you'll be able to file a police report, and those two things combined are going to make up an ID theft report. So after you've done that first step, the second step for your process of remedying this is going to be reporting it or letting the reporting bureaus know. So the reporting bureaus, there's 3 different ones, and I know them. Believe me that I know them. Let me just think about it for a second, because I always forget the names. That's Equifax, TransUnion, and does anyone know the third one? Sorry, Grace.
Experian.
Experian. You're absolutely right. Sorry about that. So Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, those are the 3 credit reporting bureaus. You can call any of them in order to let them know. So once you let one of them know, they will report it to the other 2. And after you've let them know, after you've shown them the ID theft report, they will place a fraud alert on your account, on your essentially your credit score. With that fraud alert, you're allowed to place a security freeze. The security freeze essentially means that no one can use your credit score or your credit identity in order to open new accounts, to make any purchases, to take out any loans, to open new credit cards, anything like that. So if anyone asks, essentially whenever you go to open a credit card, the credit card company is going to ask for your credit score. So if someone uses your information and you've already placed a security freeze, the credit card company is going to run into the fraud alert and the security freeze, so they're not able to access your information. Alongside that security freeze, you're able to ask for a free credit report. And with that credit report, you're going to be able to check all the transactions that your credit report has listed. And so you can say, okay, this, and this is me, but all the other things aren't me. So now you kind of have an idea of where the damage is and how you can start remedying it. So the security freeze is going to last 90 days. You can extend that. Hopefully you've been able to solve the problem after 90 days, because 90 days is a long time. So hopefully you've been able to get past it at that point. With the credit report, you should be able to start contacting your creditors. So that's the third step. The third step is alerting your creditors, so letting your credit card, your bank account, your retirement and investment accounts, your utilities providers, that your identity has been stolen, so that if they see your credit score tanking for some reason, or they see that there are really crazy expenses or really crazy loans being taken out with your credit score, they understand that you've been victim of a scam and they can help you remedy those damages. Also, credit card, bank accounts. Nowadays, most of these institutions also offer services when it comes to identity theft. So if you get in contact with your credit card or your bank account, they might have an office that will be able to assist you throughout this process, so that you don't have to do it on your own. People that know this are able to guide you through it. So just to go over the, so just to go over again, first, the submitting of the ID theft report, that is a police report and the FTC complaint. Then after that, report it to the credit reporting bureaus, and then last but not least, alert your creditors. So that is all for standard identity theft. Another thing that we've run into, especially when it comes to elderly people, is medical identity theft. And the problem with that is that someone pretends to be you in order to use your medical insurance or your medical identity in order to receive certain benefits. So the way that you can identify medical identity theft is you getting bills for services that you didn't receive. So for example, you get on the mail a bill for an MRI and you're like, I haven't got an MRI in a year and a half. I don't know what's going on here. So you understand that someone might be using your identity in order to use your insurance and get that service. You might get a call from a debt collector for a debt that you don't owe. So the debt collector might say, hey, we have a debt that you hold to this or that medical provider, but you haven't incurred that debt, so you don't understand what's going on. Someone might be using your identity. Medical collection notices on your credit report that are not yours. So again, as I said, if you check your credit report and there's something that you haven't done yourself, but it is listed there, then you might want to look into it. And then you have a denial of insurance for a service that you should receive. So if your insurance covers something, but your insurance is hesitant about providing that service to you, then you know that something might be wrong. So how to protect yourself? The first one is guard your insurance card numbers very carefully, because that is all the information that someone needs, basically. Don't share this type of information with anyone over the phone or over email, unless you're the one that's contacting this person or this service in the first place. So if your insurance calls you or your doctor calls you and they're asking you for information, that's a red flag. You should say, hey, if you need this information, send me a notice through the mail, or I can come into your office and we can talk about it. If anything, you can hang up, call, look up the phone number yourself, call and check if it was actually them that were calling you. Proactively request and review annual listings of all the benefits paid for by the insurers. So at the end of the year, reach out to your insurers, reach out to your medical provider, and get a listing for every single one of the benefits that you have received, so that you can make sure that it's only you that is using your insurance. Review your medical records, report any errors, and then not most importantly, but I think that it's something that not a lot of people know, and it's always good to keep in mind. Your pill bottles, the little orange bottles that they give you your prescription on, has a lot of information about you, information that you can use in order to steal your identity. So before you get rid of those orange bottles, scratch out the information, tear off the label, or just keep the bottle, because that information is quite important. So don't just throw away those bottles, because if someone gets their hands on them, then they can pretend to be you. And if I'm not mistaken, that might be it for today. So with 5 minutes left, we would love to open ourselves up to questions. But before we do that, also just invite you all to, if anything that we've said today rings a bell, if you need any help at all, you can contact us at that hotline, 617-727-8400, or you can go online. We have a lot more information there, and you can always file a complaint with us through that website.